Right.
Well,
Another episode.
yeah, we're back.
Back again.
Yeah.
Surprisingly.
Yeah, consistency, they say.
Yeah, that's what we're learning. Cool. Do you want to give
Yeah.
us the introduction for the book?
Not a long one, but I'll just say, so the book we read this month was Hidden Potentials, The Science of Achieving Greater Things, by Adam Grant. I think one day I was just trying to see what's good out there. Then I think came across this book. Then I was like, let's add it to the list. But yeah, essentially, the book is in 3 parts, and it's about, I think, how could I put it? Achieving our hidden potentials. Just like, but yeah, it says it's about getting better, which I think surrounds around characters. I think I think we'll touch about on it, but as we go, it talks about a chess team that were pretty much not known and how they ended up being at the top, and it wasn't because of just the skills they had, but just the sort of characters, of individual players. And then we'll look at scaffolding to overcome obstacles, which is pretty much structures that are used to motivate you in terms of achieving your goals. And the last part is about systems that help us unlock those hidden potentials, essentially.
And the system is it's hidden potential not just for us, but for others.
For society, that's how
doors, I think,
open doors. That's a rundown of it. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add, James.
No, it's just like you said, the character skills, structures for motivation, and then systems of opportunity are those 3 broad sections. And then he uses a whole bunch of because I think he's an organizational psychologist.
I know it's around there.
Yeah, I don't know if he's a practicing organizational psychologist or if he's just lectures on it. I didn't look, but he references quite a lot of studies for backing up the claims that he makes or the statements or the stories that he gives. And then he that's, I guess, why that subtitle is The Science of Achieving Greater Things.
I think just before we go on, I was just reminded when we're talking now about there's a picture on page 153, and it illustrates what each of them actually look like. And character skills, I mean, unlocking that is like breaking through a wall. Scaffolding is like you're given a rope to sort of help you climb, and as you say, systems, like the subtitle says, open doors, is having a door open for you to actually walk through. So I thought that was a very good illustration of what the book was trying to convey to us. One of my best reads to date.
It's a really good book. It's really well written. I think he ironically was not a good writer, and then he slowly progressed over time. Towards the end of the book, it talks about that, where he used to struggle, and then he actually, I think when it was one of the entrance spots to Harvard or something like that, and then he sort of did really badly on this, I don't know if it was an essay that he had to write or something. And then they were suggesting to him that he doesn't go ahead with some avenue. And that I don't know if he needed to do an extra course or something to catch up. Well, that's what they suggested.
But you might also, I think there was a similar story, but it was about a comedian that honed his skills by starting to write. And
sorry, go for it.
No, I was just checking if because I don't remember about him trying to get into Sorry?
I think it was towards the
Oh, towards the end. Again, then. I'm just
yeah. So, but yeah, there was the comedian one as well. But it's interesting how he struggles and he, figures out that okay, if he just sort of keeps trying and doesn't worry too much about like the fact that his first attempt was failure, then he'll get better. And now here we are reading one of his books and being like, it's one of the best ones to read.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then he does talk quite a bit about how writing helps to think through things clearly, and that comedian was one of those.
Yeah.
Yeah. But should we kick it off?
Yeah, we can.
Cool. So on page 13, I have a note there just talking about scaffolding. So just trying to understand what scaffolding is, and then we'll wrap around to character skills, etc., etc. But it's just in the prologue of the book where he says, in construction, scaffolding is a temporary structure that enables work crews to scale to heights beyond their reach. Once the construction is complete, the support is removed. From that point forward, the building stands on its own. In learning, scaffolding serves a similar purpose. A teacher or coach offers initial instruction and then removes the support. The goal is to shift the responsibility to you so that you can develop your own independent approach to learning. And so it's a fairly obvious thing to say what that scaffolding is, and it is kind of what you think it is. But I think a lot of the things in this book relate to that. So in order to make use of scaffolding or lay out your own scaffolding, you need to have developed some character skills. It's not to say that scaffolding doesn't also help character skill development. And then in order to open those doors for others as well, you also need to have the right both character skills and scaffolding. So, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and let me just add, essentially, I think it talks about how, I think it's kind of implied through the book that it's sort of wrong to look at someone and be like, oh, you're unteachable, or, you have to sort of give everyone the opportunity, and that also is in a form of the right scaffolding, the right methods of teaching, and them being in space with the right learning approaches for them as individuals. So, like you said, it's those structures that just propel you from where you're at to a different point, and then after that, just like training wheels on a bicycle, they are then removed and then you can ride on your own,
Yeah, exactly. Should we start looking at the skills of character?
Yeah.
It's funny when he says the skills of character, it's so much easier to, or at least for me, to understand it when one says character skills. It's like skills of character. Just like think about it.
Yeah. I should say, I think maybe, I know this is totally unrelated, but I think just because of how we were taught to write our dissertations and stuff, there were like sections that he would like mumble off, and I think this is one that it's like making something more of a mouthful than it actually is, and yeah, anyways. I digress.
Yeah. So he talks about cognitive skills or character skills. So this is on page 19. He has a section here where he says, in cognitive skills training, the founders took a accredited business course created by the International Finance Corporation. They studied finance, accounting, HR, marketing, and pricing, and practiced using what they learned to solve challenges and seize opportunities. In character skills training, the founders attended a class designed by psychologists to teach personal initiative. They studied proactivity, discipline, determination, and practiced putting those qualities into action. So then if you pause there and you say, okay, which one of those do you think would have resulted in better performance? I would have been like, okay, a mixture of both would be better.
Yeah.
But if I had to choose one, I would have probably said the cognitive skills. But in reality, he carries on to say here, character skills training had a dramatic impact. Their firm's profit grew by an average of 30% over the next 2 years. That was nearly triple the benefit of training in cognitive skills. Studying proactivity and discipline enabled them to generate opportunities. And then a little bit further, he says, it's easy to be proactive and determined when things are going well. The true test of character is whether you manage to stand by those values when the deck is stacked against you. If personality is how you respond on a typical day, character is how you show up on the hard day. So yeah, if I don't know, that's to me wildly surprising that it can be that important. And when you have companies that are like, cool, we're going to go on a training thing, and then they teach you these like social skills, you're like, what a waste of my time. And then actually,
yeah, no, I sorry to cut you there, but I thought the same until like I actually started to think about it. And in actually this section, he mentioned discipline, and that's not a cognitive skill. It's a character skill. And I think that's one thing, if you actually, I don't know about you, but if I think back, that's like one thing that schools try to foster.
Yeah.
And just not your discipline in terms of behavior, but in your discipline in terms of how you do your work, how consistently you do, you know. And that's one thing that sort of they try to drill into people. And from this, I mean, as you said, it's at first glance, you're like, wait a minute, you know, you think, just the thought of school, you think of it as cognitive skill improvement if you go to school, and where you think that's what it's there for. But then if you actually think about it later on, that it's actually, like you said, a combination of all of them. But if you really think about it, when in the lower classes, it's usually the fundamentals which are usually tied to discipline, not really actual material per se. You know, it's like, I mean, something, and I think it was in one of the book, like coloring in between lines is actually some sort of discipline. And I mean, those are the stuff that you actually encourage to do in your earlier stages in school than later on. You know, the proper subjects actually kick in for 2 years after you start going to school, depending on what system, you know, you're at. And I mean, even thinking back while I was reading this, I was thinking, and it's something that I'd been saying, I've said a few times to people that ask me, like, should I do a master's degree? And I always say, personally, I don't know about other people, I feel like my growth was more on the character side than the cognitive side.
Yeah.
And I mean, he said it's a word that is misused now. He speaks about soft skills, but I should say, like, I was terrible before I did my master's at certain things. I'm not saying I'm good at them now. I'm much better than I was. But I think, my presentation skills, and rather those like engaging clients, you know, stakeholders, as we would call them in masters, was what I got better at than actual, you know, the work itself. Yeah.
No, I mean, character is extremely important, and I agree. I think a lot of especially as you get higher in the education world, or also when you're very young, maybe it's in that middle tier that it's not as much character. It's more sort of just focused on like, okay, we need to actually learn the cognitive side of things. It's useful. But yeah, as you get later on, we haven't done an MBA, but I assume that a lot of that is also would be character, more than purely practical knowledge. Yeah. Then going to page 26. So he says here, but according to a body of evidence, the decline in the rate of language learning around 18 is not a feature of our biology, but a bug in our education. Polyglots prove that it's possible to master new languages well into adulthood. And he goes on to say, when they finally pick up the first foreign language, it wasn't due to overcoming a cognitive block. It was because they cleared a motivational hurdle. They got comfortable with being uncomfortable. Summoning the nerve to face discomfort is a character skill, an essentially important form of determination. It takes 3 kinds of courage. Then he goes on to list them: abandoning tried and true methods, then putting yourself in the ring, and then making more mistakes than others make attempts. So we can chat through those a little bit. The first one, abandoning tried and true methods, the example that he gives there is learning styles, which is an interesting one, because the learning styles is you classically group people into visual learners, verbal learners, auditory learners, and kinesthetic learners. So then he goes to say, learning styles are a foundational element of the teacher-student experience. Around the world, 89% of teachers believe in matching their instruction to students' learning styles. There's just one problem with learning styles. They're a myth. When a team of experts conducted a comprehensive review of several decades of research on learning styles, they found an alarming lack of support for the theory. And then he goes on to say in the middle of that page, he says, the way you like to learn is what makes you comfortable, but isn't necessarily how you learn best. Sometimes you even learn better in the mode that makes you most uncomfortable, because you have to work harder at it. So yeah, I think that idea of discomfort is a helpful one. And then being comfortable with discomfort, and then abandoning tried and true methods. Obviously it's not always the case, but I think in cases like this, it's helpful to be like, sometimes it's not always perfect to adapt the learning style directly to the person. Having said that, he does say also later that it's teachers who spend more time with kids, they can adapt their teaching styles to the students. So it's not that all adaptation is bad, but it's just that sometimes when we think making it easy for someone is good, it's actually not.
I think also, just to add to that, I think there are certain things that you can't pinpoint at first glance. So you might gravitate, and I mean, he talks, I felt there was a bit of a contradiction in some of the points in how they were laid across, but it's, especially for the learning styles, it could be that it's something that people enjoy more, but it just could be that it's not necessarily the best way to deliver a certain subject across. That's just how I sort of looked at it, because I mean, later in the book he talks about how we need to enjoy what you do, especially if it's work and whatnot. And but if you then track back to this, it's like, no, the proper growth, as he put it, comes from being uncomfortable. But then if you really think about it, those were actually in 2 sections. The one was from having others help you build your character skills to how you actually stay motivated. So that's where the difference actually comes in. But if you look at them as one book closely related on how he's given is that you'd actually think, I think there's a bit of a contradiction in what he's actually said. But I should say it was quite interesting, and it made me actually reading this book made me realize I might not have been, honestly, not terrible readers in actual reading, but I did not dislike reading as much as I thought I did before we actually started reading, because I'd always think I'm not a reader or whatnot. But I'm like, no, man, I actually used to sit down and study, like, for hours on hand, and that required me to read. And I mean, in that same chapter about the systems, it talks about, I'm sure we'll get there, but how Finland were able to achieve the scores they do, and one of the things was actually encouraging reading from early on, because then that allows you to stay focused when you actually get to studying useful material and stuff. Like that's like one of the bridges they have in trying to foster that side of skills, if you may. Reading that, I was like, I may have not been as cerebral as I thought, but yeah, like I said, it's the book opened me up to understand a lot more why certain things are applied in the way they do. If I may,
and that reading one is a interesting one, because I think it kind of does fall onto that character skill of you. In order to be able to make use of the scaffolding or organizational structures that get put in place, there are some foundational things that you need. And what Adam would say, and I'd probably agree with, is that reading is one of them. Because if you can't just enjoy reading, then it limits you from doing so many other things, which is, an interesting observation. Okay, going on to, so that's abandoning tried and true methods. Then the other one is putting yourself in the ring. So on page 33, he raises two things. He says, or he has another illustration, and these illustrations are very good. They're done by, I think, two different people. Liz Fosselin is the one of them that does this illustration, but it's, the top graph is, if you start today, and it's just got this sort of upward trend that grows over time. And then then there's another graph below it that says if you start when you're ready, and then the graph only starts going up like far down to the right hand side of the graph. And it's kind of obvious if you look at it like that, because like obviously if you start today, you're going to make more progress in the long run because you started earlier. Same idea like I've spoken about before.
In Atomic Habits.
Habits, investing practices, the psychology of money, all kinds of things like that. But it goes too with other things like the foreign language learning. If you think, okay, I'll start when I'm ready, you don't actually get the real practice in. But if you instead become comfortable with discomfort and you say, cool, I'm just going to go for it, then that's when you start really learning. So the examples that they give here is like some polyglots, in order, so people that can speak many languages and that, they are, the reason why they can do it is not because they're geniuses, it's because they threw themselves in the ring. They basically, some of them went to stay with families that only spoke, for example, Spanish or some other language that wasn't their native language. And because they did that, they were forced to learn. When people in the past might have even told them, like, no, you just don't have the aptitude for it. You're not ever enough for.
I should say that's something I believe for a long time, that you can only learn a new language when you're young. It's something that somehow society drills into us. Up until I read this, and I was like, I probably read this book 11 years too late, because I feel like if I'd applied that maybe 10 years ago, I probably would have picked up a language. I know it's very embarrassing. I've been in the country for 12 years now, and there's no like local language that I can speak.
I mean,
It's
I've been here for 30 years.
it's nothing I'm proud of.
You can speak English, at least. That's something.
So yeah, but I should say, I also found this extremely helpful in any other area in life. That only if we're comfortable in failing. I know that sounds terrible. No parent would want to hear their kid say that. But when you're comfortable with failing and actually taking correction or criticism for it and actually self-correct is actually when people grow and learn. And I think there was somewhere where it talks about, before you get up and, carry on, only then do you learn better than, like I said, it says here, when you're ready. And I think that's the excuse we always say in anything, that when are you going to start this? Oh, when I'm ready. I know there have been instances where I've been asked to do something and my answer has been, I don't think I'm there yet.
Yeah.
And so often that's the excuse most of us use.
Yeah. And it's a really detrimental excuse. And sort of to counteract that, later in the book, he actually gives some examples of people who wanted to learn something, and so they went and they started. So the one guy wanted to learn quantum mechanics.
Yes.
He signed up to teach the quantum mechanics course, and that's how he learned quantum mechanics.
I think it's a section of teaching and coaching, and
But I mean, that's the thing that we need to get comfortable with this comfort. And I think that I think they even said this in that section, but if we're honest with people and we say, look, I'm teaching this, but I actually don't know.
I'm not an expert.
I'm not an expert. I'm learning as we go. People aren't going to be upset with me.
And funny enough, in that same section, that's where it actually said about how your experts can teach.
Exactly.
And he corrects Paul talk about when you get the one statement that's usually thrown, that what experts do, and
if you
those that don't do teach, those who can't teach, and those who can't do something like
those
that.
Those who can't do teach, which is funny because he ends up being like, well, that's the way to learn something. But also, like you were saying, that as it turns out, in order for you to learn something better, it's often seemingly worse to go to an expert to try and learn that thing. It's better to go to someone who's trying to learn it themselves, or has just learned it and stuff, because you're able to relate to them more. And it's the idea of the curse of knowledge, which we'll touch on, but where if you are an expert, you have so much knowledge that you forget what you don't know. You forget what others don't know.
You expect everyone to be on the same page, essentially.
So you talk about like fundamental particles or something in quantum mechanics, and everyone
should know
what you're talking about. But if you were teaching it for the first time, you would be like, okay, what is a fundamental particle? What is nth by that? What is a quark? What is a... by the way, I don't actually know.
Oh, trust me, I did it just to get by. I should pull out that book. But again, I know I keep bringing this up, but that was also another concept or another idea that was in the book that I was like, but wait a minute. He said this earlier, and what I was circling back to is about how in the first chapter, and I think it's this chapter, he talks about how experienced teachers produce, I know that doesn't, but produce better individuals, essentially, or in the long run. Their students do better in life than inexperienced teachers, which I felt was like...
contradicting,
but again, like I'm saying, the ideas, when I think of the ideas are a little different. Being experience doesn't really make you an expert at that level, so that's like when I'm like, okay, let me shift my thought process. But that was one idea that I felt was a bit at first glance.
And I think you're right, because so just to make it clear, early in the book, or in the earlier sections of the book, he says teachers who, if you want to predict a future student's success, you look at the kindergarten teachers and you look at how much experience the kindergarten teacher has. And if they have a lot of experience, the kids are way more likely to be successful. If they have not much experience, they're way less likely to be successful. Then later, he goes and says, but experts don't get taught by experts because you're not going to learn as much. And it kind of, like you're saying, Peter, contradicts a bit. But I think the important thing is possibly as well that it's got to do with the kindergarten teachers. And like you're saying, it's not really an expert thing. It's more of an experience thing. So kindergarten teachers aren't teaching like ridiculously complicated concepts or something. They sort of learn over time how to
handle
the things to kids so that they understand and speak in the language that they understand and things like that.
And I think also, sorry to cut you, it ties in with, to some level, the whole teacher-student relationship, because if you've encountered a lot of students of a set, and please don't come after me for some of this, but you have come across individuals of different groups, say them as groups, that at a glance, within minutes, you can identify that, okay, this child is like this, based on the experience that you've had, and you're able to relate to them and teach them according to, or offer the encouragement they need based on their personality, or how you feel they'll take it, because you have that experience, because you've been in the profession over a long time. If you're new to the profession, you're probably still trying to get your foot in and trying to understand how to deal with certain children and how to motivate them, and, et cetera, et cetera.
And those two examples also, they remind me of something which I tend to do maybe too quickly, which is taking these kind of thoughts and ideas and applying it to absolutely everything. Where often these studies, and you'll hear like serious researchers repeating this often, they'll be like, this study applies to this. So, it's a very, very fine-grained thing that it applies to. And then what we often tend to do is go and apply it to absolutely everything. So you take the kindergarten teacher thing, and then you go and apply it to
university,
going to university, or going to like an astrophysicist to learn physics. And then you miss the nuance in that in certain situations this is maybe a better approach than that. But I think at the end of the day, probably just trying to see what works over time is the best approach, because there's so much nuance in all the things.
That's what I was saying. At first glance, I was like, wait a minute, you said this, but again, like I said, I haven't thought of, and that's how I'm able to sort of explain that, okay, this is essentially why that might be the case, because the cases are actually very different. The sort of environment that's needed to foster a kindergarten or a child is way different to a university student or an adult trying to specialize in a particular field. It's very, very different.
Two different worlds. Okay, but should we wrap up the 3 points? So we said abandoning tried and true methods, putting yourself in the ring, and then the last one is making more mistakes than others make attempts. So he says on page 39, rather than aiming to reduce your mistakes, you should strive to increase them. Many experiments have shown that when students are learning new information, if they are randomly assigned to guess wrong before being given the right answer, they are less likely to make errors later on tests. This is one of the things that I really like to keep in mind, because I just find it so true that if you allow someone to be willing to make mistakes, that they learn better and they remember things more for lots of reasons. I mean, you're more alert because you're like, okay, I actually forgot that. Or I got it wrong. So it's like that active recall idea. So trying to, before you just look for the answer, trying to remember the answer, even if you fail, you will still end up better off because you tried, and then that concept gets more ingrained of, okay, that's what the actual answer was, and this is why.
I mean, it's the same as, that what they say, that if you're an employee and you make let's say 500,000 mistake, should you be fired or kept on? And there are people that are absolutely fire that person, and then there are those people that say, actually no, because he will never make that 500,000 mistake ever again. Because if you hire someone else, because they don't know, the chances are high that they'll make that mistake, meaning that at every cycle you will be losing 500,000. So rather keep, because after that he's never going to make that mistake. So it's that the more you make, the more you're willing to make mistakes and take constructive criticism and correct yourself from it, the better you become. Because like you said, you will, the next time you're in that situation, remember that, no, I shouldn't do that because the result of this is that.
And being comfortable with making those mistakes. So the psychologists call that learned industriousness. So if you get praised, so he says here, when you get praised for making an effort, the feeling of effort itself starts to take on secondary reward properties. Instead of having to push yourself to keep trying, if you feel pulled forwards. So if we get comfortable with making mistakes, we can get more of that learned industriousness, because we're not worried about making the mistakes. We just want to keep trying. And then people should, I was talking to Jamie the other day about it, rather than, often what we do is we say to people, well done, you achieved this thing. But that's not really a long-term helpful thing, because the achievement isn't really the important thing. It's the act of trying and keeping and failing but carrying on. And that continued putting in the effort, that's the thing that we should praise, because that's the thing that will help people to be eager to learn in the future and keep trying, and even if they fail, they'll keep going. Whereas if we just say, well done, you achieved this thing, then people, as soon as they fail to achieve something, then they get put off, and then disaster. A last comment there, he says on page 41, you don't need to get comfortable before you can practice your skills. Your comfort grows as you practice your skills. And I think that's the mistake of the language learning that people make often, and many different things. All right. Human sponges. Should we look at that?
Yeah.
So on page 49, he talks about absorptive capacity. So absorptive capacity is the ability to recognize value, assimilate, and apply new information. It hinges on two key habits. The first is how we acquire information. So do you react to what enters your field of vision, or are you proactive in seeking new knowledge, skills, and perspectives? Second is the goal you're pursuing when you filter information. Do you focus on feeding your ego or fueling your growth? And then he has a a diagram that kind of shows the different quadrants of if ego versus growth and reactive versus proactive. And he gives some examples, and he says reactive and growth oriented. So you would be two of them. So either like proactive and growth, or ego and proactive, or and he says here, reactive and growth orientated it's not a bad thing, but the problem is that you don't seek information, and so you don't make progress until someone else sort of picks you up or shows you how to do something. And so the sweet spot is when people are both proactive and growth oriented. So you need to want to learn things, seek them out, and so wanting to learn things, growth oriented, and then proactive, seeking out the things to learn. I think that's fairly intuitive, but it's important.
Yeah, I think it was also in the section Paul later on where he mentioned something that I found very interesting. I think it's on page 55, I don't know, Getting the Cold Hard Truth, where he speaks about the difference between seeking feedback and seeking advice. Now, I read that and I was like, that's very true, because you are reactive to feedback and you proactive to advice. So if you get feedback, you kind of feel it as, if you phrase it as, I want feedback from you, you just, when something bad or something you don't like comes your way, you take it as plain out criticism. But when you actually ask for advice, it's like, I come to you seeking help in sort of sense, to be like, I'll use what you tell me. So I found that just that mind shift, or just that change in, where it's just like, very interesting. Like, it's the same as how you identify that whole, are you a smoker or you don't smoke anymore? Just
that mind shift.
Just that tiny mind shift. Those changing words, though, perspective goes a long way,
So he's saying that seek advice, don't seek feedback, because we classically think we should be seeking feedback. But actually, he tried that out, and then he got a whole bunch of criticism that's just like basically not helpful at all. But if you change that word to say, please can you give me advice, then it shifts people to, instead of thinking about the past, which is feedback, always reflecting on the past, instead of thinking about the past, asking someone for advice shifts them towards saying, what can this person do in the future to be better? And it's basically it's just a better way of getting more helpful feedback. So it is like you say, it's nuance in the words, but feedback is what we want, but we want it to be useful feedback. So rather ask for advice, and you're more likely to get useful feedback.
It's interesting, just a shift in that thought, again, like you said, the past versus the future. And I think you kind of say that most people are also not very honest at giving feedback. That's the other problem, but when you, and I think he listed to, it's because people don't want to come off as being harsh or whatnot, and they'll sugarcoat stuff and all. But when they think of advice, they feel like it's something that will encourage you, and they tend to be more honest then,
it's helpful to ask people for that, rather, because it just gives you better feedback. Okay, then the next part is imperfectionist. So all of these things that we've been chatting about are all related to character. And so imperfectionism is, he says, the sweet spot between flawed and perfection. So you don't want to go too far to the extreme and say I don't mind everything being completely flawed, but you also don't want to go to the other extreme and say everything needs to be perfect. So on page 63, he says here, so it's talking about this architect who's designed a whole bunch of buildings. And then he says, I learned to be uncompromising, I learned that to be uncompromising, architects have to make compromises. Ando, I don't know. Is esteemed for his ability to make the most of limited spaces with limited budgets. He's only able to do this because he fully rejects the notion of perfectionism. He knows that to be disciplined in some areas, we have to let go of others. One of his specialties is being disciplined in deciding when to push for the best and when to settle for good enough. Yeah, I think that's a key character skill, to know when you need to keep pushing and to know when it's like, okay, this is actually good enough. Or great enough. It depends on what you're trying to achieve. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't strive for greatness in some things, but yeah, knowing when is the right time to say this is at the point where it needs to be.
Yeah,
I don't need to go further.
Yeah, I mean, there's that. I want I'll kind of put it in the way I understand it. It's if you asked to write something, the first time you write it, you pretty much are like 50%. If you take more time into it, like at least double the time, you won't actually get to 100%. You probably maybe get at 70, 75 at best. But then it will take you either twice as long or 3 times longer to get it to 90. So do you spend that extra week, instead of focusing on something else, or do you carry on up until you get that 100%?
Yeah, it's that 80-20 rule that often comes up. I can't actually remember which way around. 20% of the effort gets you 80% of the reward.
Yeah,
or vice versa. No, it must be that way around.
It's the small part will get you to 80, but then the rest will, it's like an exponential graph.
Yeah. And so often it is the case where actually we just need to do the 20%.
20, yeah.
But we get so stuck in being perfect that we try and get to the 100% and then we burn ourselves out because we just trying way too hard on something that doesn't actually really add much value.
And I think it's in this section where it says that's actually where burnout comes from. You striving or doing the same stuff over and over again, that it affects your emotions to the point that you burn out.
Yeah. And he says on page 87 as well, people who go on to become masters in their field often start out with imperfect transcripts in school. In a study of world-class sculptors, it turned out that they were mostly average students. And then he goes on to say, in their quest for flawless results, research suggests that perfectionists tend to get 3 things wrong. 1, they're obsessed with the details that don't matter, so it's the same thing that we're talking about now. 2, they avoid unfamiliar situations and difficult tasks that might lead to failure. That's what we were talking about earlier. You have to be comfortable with discomfort. You have to be willing to fail way more than anyone else, and it's fine. And then 3, they berate themselves for making mistakes, which makes it harder to learn from them. So, yeah, it's a vicious cycle.
Yeah. I think that was very interesting to me. Again, it was maybe just something that I'd never thought of to that level, where he says perfectionists don't actually incorporate new ideas. It's like you already have something, but you're like, no, it's not good enough. And you start tweaking focusing your time into tweaking it to make it better, but actually avoiding learning something different or something new, because you just, like you said, you don't want the discomfort. It's the same as I think it's in this chapter where he talks about his phase of being a diver, where he would like do the same thing over and over again, and it's like it's not good enough. He even had a nickname from it, you know, if only or something like it was like his nickname, and like up until he got comfortable to be like, I'll never be, because I mean he didn't have the agility, he didn't have all the, it didn't tick all the boxes, but he really enjoyed how it all looked and stuff, that he was encouraged to do it. But only when his coach was like, if you get, or sort of put it in the sense that your reward comes from anything different that you've done before. So the only way you know, and I think that's so true to us, like the only way that we know we're progressing is if what we do next is fairly different to what we've done before. And as perfectionists, as perfectionists, what they end up going down the rabbit hole of is they have something, but then they're like, no, it's not good enough, let me change it. But lose sight of the end goal, that's not all they need to do. There's other facets to this thing that they also need to either come up with or create.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and it's all, like we say over and over again, it's also about balancing things for, like, if you want to create a really incredible product, like say Apple products, right? I'm sure that they have to iterate thousands of times to get things just right. But that's not how they learn. That's not, you have to learn by experimenting with new things. Then once you're like, okay, cool, this thing is one of the things that I really want to make like solid and really incredible, then it's fine to go and iterate and try and improve things and get things ready, like dialed in. But if you're just wanting to get good at something and that, you have to just throw all the worries about failure and stuff like that out the window and just keep trying new things and keep learning and growing in different ways. Yeah.
I mean, I know this is that related. I don't know if you noticed that WhatsApp capitalized the online and the type in text. Oh no, it looks so hard. Like, first time I saw it, I was like, what's happening here? And like in the next update that reverted back, I was like, I never realized how pedantic I was to like a tiny change. So you know the if you're the online one, the O was capital. That threw me off.
I also saw it and I was like,
that threw me off.
I saw it and then I was like, this is weird. And then because this is in WhatsApp, right?
Yeah, WhatsApp, yeah.
Yeah, I saw it and then I was like, oh, that's weird. And then I thought to myself, it's weird that I think that it's weird. Because how was I fine with the lowercase O the whole time?
No, I hated the uppercase O. Like, I hated it. I was like, why?
Yeah. Wait, was it uppercase?
It was uppercase O. Yeah, and then now it's back to lowercase. It's always been lowercase.
Yes, yeah.
It's always been
That's
lowercase.
What I'm saying.
Yeah.
So how was I fine with the lowercase one? Because normally you would think that it should be uppercase, but I think I've seen it for so long.
It's that I hated that capitalized though.
It's also within programming.
Yeah.
I've noticed lately, which is I'm very proud of myself for. I used to be extremely pedantic when it came to like little code things, and I still am when I think that it's important, and maybe still sometimes when it's not that important. But I've gotten better at being less finicky when someone does things in a way that isn't the way that I think that they should be done.
Yeah.
Because
you're growing, James. You're becoming it.
Great. Because it's that stuff of like getting caught in things that don't matter. So much time. I think I used the example
my bad naming variable or my bad variable.
Yeah. That's just that.
I've got a better. Don't worry. I'm way better.
I think I used the example last time of the YouTuber who was saying he was packing shirts away and he was like trying to make them all perfect and stuff like that. And then he realized, like, what am I doing? Like, I'm wasting so much of my life doing this.
You're washing the dishes.
The washing dishes, exactly. And Jamie teaching me to be better in a ironic way, like not wash them as well in order to be a better human being. But the lessons we learn in life.
Just thought, it was just fitted out, the perfectionism. Like, our brains are wired differently, but then...
The word the Japanese use, he puts here, he says, wabi-sabi is the art of honoring the beauty in imperfection. So, we need to be better at wabi-sabi. Okay, then tolerating the right imperfections. So that's the wabi-sabi, but then going on to page 73 is focusing on specific and challenging things, not on perfection. So he says here, across hundreds of experiments, people who are encouraged to do their best perform worst and learn less as well. Then those who are randomly assigned to goals that are specific and difficult, they perform better. And so, it's just another interesting thing to say, to go and encourage someone you can do your best, is not always the best advice, but rather to give them very specific and difficult, not too difficult, but also not too easy tasks, because that will help them to say, okay, I know when I've achieved what I need to achieve. Whereas if you just say, go and do your best, then it might cause someone to go down that spiral of perfectionism. And we all know now, at least, that's not a good idea. Then a last one example that he gives there for imperfectionists is the MVP versus MLP. So on 77 he says, pivoting is a popular concept in Silicon Valley where it's often said that done is better than perfect, which, as a side note, is a good thing. Then he says, to rapidly iterate and improve, entrepreneurs are advised to build a minimum viable product. But excellence is a higher standard. For me, that means aiming for minimum lovable product. And then he goes on to say how to see if it's a minimal, an MLP. He says here, research indicates that one of the best ways to gauge the value the value of other people's judgments is to look for convergence between them. If one person raises a red flag, it might be idiosyncratic. But if a dozen people independently have the same issue, it's more likely to be an objective problem. So what he's, I think, trying to get at is, it's not just because you aren't making it perfect doesn't mean you shouldn't make it really good. And there's cases for both, like we've discussed. But what he likes to try and do in certain cases, and I'm sure this book, him writing this book was one of those cases, is rather than just striving for a minimum viable product, to try and aim for a minimum lovable product, and to gauge if he's got that correct, because the danger is it's got to do with measurement and things like that. You don't want to end up in the perfectionism trap. So you want to have some actual viable way to measure whether you are doing
the right
job
thing
or not, without getting stuck in the perfectionism trap. And he says one of the best ways of doing that is to go to a bunch of different people, and if if a large majority of them say, yeah, this is I don't like this part or something, then you know, okay, that actually needs to be improved. But if one person says, so you get 10 people and one out of the 10 people say,
doesn't like
that's not great, then often that's just an idiosyncrasy where it's like, it's just something
it's his opinion,
person. But if the vast majority of people are like, no, then you can have a high degree of confidence. Okay, this is actually something I need to work on and I need to improve to make it a minimum.
I don't know if it was this section where it talks about that play as well, where the one lady before the big show actually opened, invited critics to watch something, and they all pretty much had the same problem with something, and she decided to tweak just that, and essentially we ended up being the best thing, but essentially nothing really changed. It was just, and she had also, and I think it was also the perfectionist. She literally incorporated something she had already introduced way back when, but just because it was in a different light, people didn't see the similarities, and they weren't very critical at it as when it was presented as a completely new idea without, adding parts from different choreographies. I think it was. It was like a dance thing. But yeah.
Yeah, I think being able to tweak what we are making based off of when there's a consensus that something is not good, and not taking that personally. And again, going and asking for advice.
It's good you say that. I think it was when there was somewhere where it talks about that the feedback is mostly no person, and it reminded me of the book we did last month, where we need to kind of separate our craft from who we are. If someone says you've done a terrible job or something, it's not them attacking your character, it's them attacking your ability to do something, and take it as it may, but don't think it also implies that you're a terrible human being, and so often we usually intertwine, the different
and it doesn't also mean that you can't improve. I'm not saying you won't be able to if you let it get you to the point of shutting down. Is what I'm trying to get at. Well, that's very true. Okay, should we move on to scaffolding?
Yes, please.
Okay, so he opens up there and he says character skills aren't enough. We need other things. Specifically, we need scaffolding, structures for motivation. So just to have strong character skills, but without those structures for motivation, you're looking for trouble. Because no one has strong enough will. I mean, that's a funny thing as well, because will is not the thing that we need, willpower. We need structures of motivation. So he says here on page 84, there are 4 key features of scaffolding. One is scaffolding generally comes from other people. You can create it for yourself, but it generally comes from other people. Scaffolding is tailored to the obstacle in your path. And scaffolding comes at a pivotal point in time. So not all scaffolding always applies. And that kind of leads to the last one. Scaffolding is temporary. So it's not necessary to have it permanently there. I mean, that there can't always be permanent scaffolding, but normally scaffolding is temporary. So, going on to deliberate play. So on page 90, he says here that research demonstrates that people who are obsessed with their work put in longer hours, yet fail to perform any better than their peers. In a study of concert pianists who attained international acclaim before turning 40, few were obsessed with their craft. In their early years, most practiced piano only for an hour a day. They weren't raised by slave drivers or drill sergeants. Their parents responded to their intrinsic motivation with enthusiasm. Then he goes on to say elite musicians are rarely driven by obsessive compulsion. They're usually fueled by what psychologists call harmonious passion. Harmonious passion is taking joy in a process rather than feeling pressure to achieve an outcome. And then hopefully the last little bit there, he says here that the importance of passion isn't unique to music. And so he wraps up by saying the question is how to build scaffolding to bring passion into practice. And his favorite answer to this is called deliberate play. And so what deliberate play is if you look at 2 different options, I have to do something versus I want to do something. Deliberate play is the I want to do this thing. And so if we are forced to, we have to go and practice piano every day, that's the thing that's going to cause us to burn out and not to end up becoming good at that thing. But if we just allow our interests to sort of take us along, then we are more likely to enjoy it, and therefore we're more likely to continue, and therefore we're more likely to gain those compounding effects. There is also the idea of, if we think about the previous book that we read, what do you call it? Inspiration strikes at 9 every day. So when you're writing, then the joke is that if you want to become a good writer, and you need inspiration, and so people often are like, oh well, I'll just write when I'm inspired. And then the one of the guys who is a professional writer says, yeah, I do only write when I'm inspired, but inspiration strikes at 9 every day, because he's got that rhythm and stuff like that. So
doesn't that he has really to think about, so that we don't make that excuse that I'm not inspired to this, I don't write. To him, it was like, or at the time said that regardless of where I am or how I feel, 9 a.m.
yeah,
inspiration strikes. It's the same framing of the mind type of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a balance with that as well, because we don't want to force ourselves to do things and then burn out.
Yeah.
But we also don't want to, from that other book, we don't want to just leave things to be like, when I feel like it, that's when I'll do it. But I think maybe the point is when you're really feeling like, okay, no, I'm not enjoying this, take a step back and try something else, do something else for a bit. And
I should say, just before we move on, I don't know if I think this is one time that I read a story, and there are actually a few stories that I actually want to go look up and see. But did you? I went up and watched a TED Talk by Evelyn. The lady, the one with the musician that's deaf.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah, crazy. She she's amazing. Yeah. But anyway, that was just. But I mean, she's an example of allowing someone, like the whole scaffold, because remember the coach is the one that was like, okay, we need to do this differently. We can't teach you in the normal way, but how else, and use that to better her skills. I mean, she talks about how she could hear using every part of her body, like her feet, translate something different. To the point where over time she could hear, as she puts it, music through.
She hears with her body.
Yeah, but to as small as the tip of her fingers, she can hear music from the tip of her fingers, and they're like, that's impressive.
Wow.
Yeah. And I mean, like I said, I watched it, and there was she was making a joke, like, can you hear this, at some point where she was not drumming, she was just like, and she was like, I wasn't doing anything, but like people were like, anticipating some sort of sound, and I'm sure if she said there was some sound being emitted there, people would be like, because I was also in that mindset. But she's impressive, quite impressive.
Yeah, and she also is an advocate for deliberate play. Yeah. But so going on then so this is still within the context of structures for motivation.
Yeah.
So there's deliberate play, and that's the idea behind something like deliberate play is scaffolding for transforming the daily grind. So that's actually the chapter that we're in. So doing deliberate play so that you scaffold away the daily grind. And then the next part is 98, shifting focus. So this is about scaffolding for removing the need of willpower, or for willpower. So he says here, research suggests that people with the most discipline actually use the least amount of it. So I think this is actually something we've touched on in a few books. But he says, my colleague Angela Duckworth, by the way, we must maybe read that at some point, the book called, I think it's Grit, by Angela Duckworth. But my colleague Angela Duckworth finds that instead of relying on willpower to push through a strenuous situation, they changed the situation to make it less strenuous. So that's the people who seemingly have lots of willpower. Then he goes on to say, when I first watched the videos of the marshmallow test, I was expecting to see a subset of kids with super willpower. What I saw instead was kids creating bits of scaffolding to remove the need for willpower. So the marshmallow test is that it's a very famous test where you put a kid in a room and you say, if you don't eat this marshmallow, then we will give you 2 marshmallows some amount of time later. And then a lot of the kids that didn't eat the marshmallow ended up being successful later.
But wasn't there like another research that sort of debunked that?
I don't remember.
There was something else we read that was kind of those, but they said something. It doesn't really, but not to say I've heard that before about that. But there was some book we read that it never really correlated to success, and because there were other people that. But it could have been a different one. But there was a certain behavior trait that was picked up that was actually quite negative from the kids that actually didn't eat the marshmallow.
Yeah.
But
I remember vaguely something about
process,
but I don't remember.
But yeah, there was that that relation that was just like you're saying, that people, the ones that didn't eat, but there was a whole thing of how the reason they didn't eat, also I think later on it was discovered that the reason they didn't eat wasn't necessarily that they had this was what it was actually, that they didn't have more willpower than the other kids. I think that was I've forgotten what book that was in.
I also don't remember. I want to say it was like Deep Work.
But it was not that the kids had more willpower than the others, but just that they were better at distracting themselves.
And that's the same thing that he's saying.
Yeah, he's saying the same thing. It's
a consistent theme I think we'll see throughout these kind of books, where it's just framing a similar idea in different
ways. Way.
And he frames it in the idea of scaffolding. So he's saying that, to reread it, he says, when I first watched these videos of the marshmallow test, I was expecting to see a subset of kids with superior willpower. What I saw instead was kids creating bits of scaffolding to remove the need for willpower. And then it goes on to talk about how they distract themselves, like you mentioned, and things. So I think just picturing that as a different way of scaffolding, I think we even used this example when we discussed the marshmallow test and willpower back then. The easiest way to not eat sweets is to not have them. That's how you have strong willpower for not eating sweets. You don't have them in your house. I don't even have the ability or scaffolding to prevent them getting to my house. but yeah.
I have a very strong ability. If I'm not hosting, there's no junk around, because no.
You need to uninstall this guy. Okay, then taking breaks. So on page 102, it's not about preventing burnout. Research reveals when we work nights and weekends, it's not just about preventing burnout. Research reveals that when we work nights and weekends, our interest and enjoyment in our tasks drop. And then he goes on to say, obsession leads us to see rest as taking the foot off the gas pedal. Under harmonious passion, it's easier to recognize that rest is a supply of fuel. We take regular reprieves to maintain energy and avoid burnout. Relaxing is not a waste of time, it's an investment in well-being. And then he says, play is not a frivolous activity, it's a source of joy and a path to mastery. So, yeah, then he's got an illustration there, again by Liz, when it says when we should take a break, and there's sort of a fuel gauge that's roughly just past the middle, and then when we actually take a break, it's when the fuel or accelerator or whatever is right at the tilt.
Fuel gauge.
Saying fuel gauge, it's weird that it's a fuel gauge. Like, it should be like a ramp counter.
It's not real. It's a fuel gauge.
We'll chat to Liz about her. She's normally got good illustrations. I think she made a mistake.
I think it's a good one. I think used to it being sideways.
It should but the fuel thing should be empty.
Yes,
that's full.
No, that's E. It's labeled E.
Oh, empty.
Yes.
But empty is normally to the left.
It's at the bottom.
To the left.
That's what I'm saying. Like,
maybe in America or something, it's the opposite way. But anyway, regardless, it's a good illustration. We definitely don't take breaks when we should.
Often enough. Yeah. Funny enough, and I mean, it was spoken about in the whole system thing with the Finnish education system. But, studies say, like, you cannot stay focused for more than 20 minutes. I'm sure people can, but average, I'll say average. Let me put it there, because and this is essentially the idea that it's also been put across here, that you want students to take a break after 40 minutes instead of at the 20 mark, and have them like a short activity one. I think that's one idea of how to achieve what they were trying to say here about taking breaks. You don't go all flat out before, but again, somehow that's how society wants it to be, or that's what society puts across, and that's what people naturally do. They'll only take a break when they're exhausted. They never take a break for the sake of, okay, I think it's time for me to refuel now. They only do it when it's a little too late.
Yeah. And I don't think it has to be that, like, exactly 20 minutes.
Yes,
or this and that. But it's just like the regular taking
of breaks
as a normal part of your practice. Go for a walk, do something. I need to listen to that advice. Is way healthier and way more sustainable. And we often think, okay, but if we're taking breaks and stuff, we're not getting as much work done. But generally, what seemingly this book and others have said is, if you do take those breaks and you don't just go full tilt all the time, and you allow for a bit of creativity to come through and stuff like that, and you allow your subconscious to mull over those ideas rather than consciously thinking through them 24/7, you're able to solve problems better. You're able to do more work because you aren't as like stressed and pressured and worried. And so,
no, I remember like when I was doing my IGCSE, I always say like, if ever I would want to return, like if there's a part in life, the discipline I had then was something I would want, like even today, like not today, that was an exact, but in recent times, I like often think about that if only I had the discipline I had then, like I feel like I would have been far in life, because like, I don't know, somehow, like I'd heard about the whole 20 minutes, whatnot, and like, I was so disciplined, like that holiday, daily, I think I'd wake up at like, from like 7 to 8, I'd be like stuck studying, and it would be in like somehow I was disciplined enough to study for 20 minutes and take a 5-minute break. 20 minutes, 5-minute break. And I should say, like, I'm not bragging, but my IGCSE results were...
I'm not bragging, but
I'll tell you anyways. No, it wasn't great. I didn't get all straight A's, but I should say where I was, like my grades in previous years as compared to then were like, you know, it's when your results come and you're like,
yeah,
surely this isn't me, you know? But when I thought back, I was like, I actually did put in the work.
Yeah.
You know, I did put in the work.
Yeah. But the thing is doing that consistently. And I don't think you've done bad for yourself either. So I don't think you have to worry about what you could have been. You're doing just fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. But should we go to the getting unstuck?
Getting unstuck, yeah.
107. They say a rut is not a sign that you've tanked. A plateau is not a cue that you've peaked. They're signals that it might be time to turn around and find a new route. Then they go on to discuss the fact that often what we do is we get stuck and we get disappointed and things like that, or we have to turn around and we're like, oh man, this is such a waste. I'm not doing well. But then they go on to say here, after poring over more than a century of evidence on progress, cognitive scientists Wayne Gray and John Lindenstead observed a fascinating arc. When our performance stagnates before it improves again, it declines. When people's skills stalled in tasks ranging from Tetris to golf to memorizing facts, they didn't usually ascend again until after they had deteriorated. In other words, what they're saying is, in order for you to progress, you sometimes have to actually deteriorate a little bit. And then they go on to say the reason why that happens is likely because of the fact that, let's say you're trying to go down one path and you keep on getting stuck there. You then have to try something else. And in order to try something else, you possibly have to learn new skills and adapt to different things.
You have to unlearn, then learn.
Yeah, well, unlearn, then you have to learn different skills, and then you have to try, and that takes time. And so your productivity or whatever it might be, your skill level, seems like it's deteriorating, and it kind of does in some way.
It does. To be honest, it does, but it doesn't mean that it will stay. If you are proactive about it, it doesn't mean it will stay in a decline. Yeah. Okay.
So if you, for example, practicing golf and you get stuck and you just can't seem to get better, the answer is not to try and perfect that swing or whatever. The answer is probably you need to try something different. But in order to try a different swing or that, you're probably almost definitely gonna be worse at it. And then you slowly learn, and maybe even that course fails and you try again, but eventually you'll find a swing that suits you better, that works better for you, and then you will have improved.
Even on that example, which is a good example, it also means like when you actually, again, like you say, if you've hit a ceiling with the swing that you do, when someone comes and be like, I see you do this as you swing, rather do this, automatically for the first few practices after that, you would default to your normal swing.
Yeah.
You know, up until you actively think that, no, I shouldn't do this. I mean, for instance, myself, I don't play golf that much, but the concept of keeping the eye on the ball, it's the easiest saying, but it's the one thing that, and for me it was, I always wanted to see where my ball went. You know, like, only up until like, no, there are people with me here that do see where the ball has gone, so like, I just need to focus on hitting this ball. Then eventually, like, my swing got better. Not that I'm a good golf player, but
you're a great golf player.
No, but just that simple thing of no, I don't need. It took a while,
Yeah.
but afterwards it improved the way I hit the ball.
Yeah.
Like something as small as that. But again, it was like in that moment, it's like you're still doing it and you're like, but I'm not getting better. Like, why? But you know why.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to be willing to decline a little bit. Still under getting unstuck, there's another good example that they give, not directly related to that, but it's about a compass rather than a map. So there's a little drawing of someone holding a map and saying that, like, basically this is what we think that we need in order to make progress. We think we need a perfect map, but actually what we need is just like a compass that kind of guides us in the right direction. When we veer a little bit, it's fine. We sort of get pointed back to where we originally aiming. But we think that we need this perfect map, and so what often we'll do is we'll like plan out so much stuff to try and get ready. But it goes back to what was said previously. You need to develop that character skill to get comfortable with being, comfortable with being uncomfortable. So that you can, rather than feeling I need to have this perfect plan and need to know all of the details and stuff like that, just like, okay, I know roughly where I'm going. I know kind of how I could roughly get there. Don't know exactly the details, but I'm just going to take one step at a time and start to make progress now, rather than starting in the distant future and then only making progress from then. Yep. So to get unstuck, don't try and create a map.
Yeah, I mean, even the example of the person they used was a pitcher, and the one guy was like, definitely the sweet spot is at 60 miles per hour, you have to throw them. But he then realized like that didn't work for him. I think it talks about it's about adaptation, even with, the scaffolding and everything there, you have to understand the environment you're in, and like you said, treat what people say to you as a compass. I remember, again, like I said, this book, it's about taking your own advice at times. I remember in varsity, there were a few friends that I would speak to, and I would always try and say, doubt always comes in when, let's say, you can, and I mean, it always happens. You come here as a group, years down the line, others have graduated, used to battling to get your degree and stuff. And I've seen many friends that have been in a position where they're like beating themselves up for this reason. And what I would try to tell them is like, listen, like, we all have our different journeys. And it's very bad to look at someone else's lives and be like, that should have been my life. I've also been there where, for instance, when we finished studying, like undergrad, like everyone else had gone off to work and whatnot, and I think we only joined the workforce 3 years, meaning that we're 3 years behind, and like all the people that were studying were probably like intermediates and senior developers. We're like, only studying then. And I mean, even when I was German, like, everyone seemed to be, making money, living there. Like, I was still not, And it's like, it plays at you, but then you have to realize, like, no, the campus they took allowed them to exit that route. I'll use undergrad as an exit. Mine just read me further down the road, Do I regret studying further? No. Like I said, like, I probably would have been terrible at a lot of things in the workplace if I didn't do my master's. And using that compass for me, knowing that that's the compass I need for my life, I think that's also a choice. Not everyone seeks help at the moment where they really need to. For me, it was then when like, no, making that choice. And I think you said something earlier, but you have to make that choice, I don't know what it was we were talking about, but
Memory of a goldfish.
memory of a goldfish. No, it was about characters. Which characters you like? You have to choose what you relate with or what to sort of grab on in terms of which characters you take further on in life. I think it was at the very beginning, but it was like even going down that path of was a choice. We didn't have to, but we made that choice. With it was a good choice or not, we yet to find out. But like you said, we're not doing bad at life at the moment, so
Fine.
it's good.
I'm happy, content with where I am in life.
Yeah. So yeah, my point was just don't look at someone else's life and think yours will pan out the same way.
That's the danger as well with the Instagram and the social media stuff in general, is that it makes it easier to compare yourself to things, and sometimes unrealistic things. People do sort of try and post their best selves and that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a dangerous thing to play the comparison game. Okay, should we go back to the last bit of the getting unstuck part?
Yes.
So the benefits of taking a detour. So on page 123, like a little bit earlier, they do talk about the stuff that we've already covered, so I'll skip over that. But the whole idea of the curse of knowledge and the experts and not going to the experts and that. But yeah, 123, so taking a detour. He says, when I ask people what it takes to achieve greater things, one of the most common answers is that you need to be laser focused and single-minded in your dedication. Then he goes on to say, but the evidence tells a different story. A digression doesn't have to be a diversion. It can be a source of energy. In one study, when people had spent engaging evenings on their side hustles, they performed better the next day in their regular jobs. In another study, when people took on serious hobbies at home, their confidence climbed at work. But only if the hobbies were in a different area from their jobs. Then he goes on, of all the factors that have been studied, the strongest known force in daily motivation is a sense of practice. Sometimes you can build momentum by taking a detour to a new destination. So yeah, I think that it's a very helpful idea to say, if you are wanting to, use the example of software development, if you're wanting to become a better software developer, often people will be like, okay, well then you need to just focus way more on like learning way more about software and stuff. And there's an element of truth in that, but doing something else, say for example, I don't know whether this is true or not, but us doing things like this podcast or reading the books and things like that, that's not what we do for our living. It's just something we do out of interest. But doing something like that, having a separate hobby that takes you away from that daily work can be really helpful.
Yeah.
It seems like it would be a waste of time, but actually it can help you be a better employee or whatever. Yeah. Should we go to the tutor effect? So 133, I think it is. So he says here, where are we? Okay, here. So he says, considerable evidence shows that studying with knowledgeable colleagues is good for growth. The U.S. intelligence agencies, if you want to predict which teams will produce the best work, the most important factor to consider is how often colleagues teach and coach one another. Then he goes on to say, psychologists call this the tutor effect. It's even effective for novices. The best way to learn something is to teach. You remember better after you recall it, and you understand better after you explain it. And then a few pages later, on 37, he says, teaching others can build our competence, but it's coaching others that elevates our confidence. When we encourage others to overcome obstacles, it can help us find our own motivation, and I've seen it happen as a parent. So, yeah, I think that idea of teaching in order to become confident is a very helpful one. And then also coaching to gain confidence.
I think you stopped the mirror.
So teaching to gain competence.
But
teaching to gain competence, and then coaching to gain confidence. And he calls that the coaching effect. It's just I think something else that he touches on is on the next page. He says here, in one experiment, high schoolers earned higher report grades in multiple subjects, including math, after being randomly assigned to give advice to younger students on how to stay motivated and avoid procrastinating. People who are struggling to save money, lose weight, control their tempers, and find jobs all came away more motivated after giving advice rather than receiving it. And then to wrap it up, he says the coach effect captures how we marshal motivation by offering encouragement to others that we need for ourselves. And then lastly, he says, in my research, I found it more motivating to be a giver than a receiver. Oh. So I think he wrote a book, something about giver. Let me just check if it's in the front of this book, because normally they have. Yeah, Give and Take by Adam Grant. So Give and Take is a book that I think he's referring to when he says, in my research, I found it more motivating to be a giver than a receiver. So basically, if you're giving advice to someone, you're probably benefiting, maybe even more than them. Like you said earlier, I need to take my own advice. It sounds funny because it sounds like you have all the best advice, but in actual fact, it's just often very helpful and motivating to give
others,
to give advice.
It's the whole practice what you preach thing. It's so often people that say out stuff are the ones that are caught like, but you said this, but you don't do the same thing, you know. But I should say the story of the Gordon 13, which is what brings us on the ideologies of this chapter, is actually quite interesting, you know. Just the whole define the odds, you know, and what they put in place for them to allow each other to have the opportunity to teach others, you know, as a way of gaining competence for them, because they needed to be competent.
Yeah. So that's the 13 people who were of color, I assume, probably black and maybe different colors, but it was when the whole racial thing was a big issue. Not that it's completely gone away now, but there wasn't, if you were not white, you weren't able to participate in the military or navy or something.
I think there was a point where they like completely fizzed it off, and then in 1944, I think, during World War, I think it was around World War II, I think that's when they were all in, like, sort of invited to... but this was for them to become because it did say that there were people at the time of color in the military, but they would do your petty jobs like shining shoes apparently, or clean dishes or whatnot. But this was actually the first time to be like officers and stuff.
And then one of the concerns was that, like, well, at that time it's like, well, obviously people that aren't white are and then so that was a big thing, and
also they also had the whole they had to do a 6-month course in 10 weeks.
So they had like so much pressure, and this pressure of saying like, okay, well, we have to do this course in such a limited amount of time, and there's this impression that people of color aren't as smart as white people and stuff like that. And then long story short, they ended up achieving
being the top,
the highest grades ever.
Yeah. The point where they had to retake some test and they even scored higher.
They didn't trust that they didn't cheat.
Yeah.
And then they scored even higher. Which was, So that's a really great story, because and it had to do with how they learned, and they took a whole bunch of these ideas where teaching each other and learning from one another and gaining experience together as a group. And then they ended up doing incredibly well. And
I mean, that was one. The other interesting was the whole telling students that that one I find interesting. If I were like a teacher, I'd probably use it in a test. If they choose an option, a multiple choice one, but they were a bit in doubt, they should write someone's name who they think will get that question right, and if that person does, they will get the point. That was, and that also apparently improved student marks.
And was the strategy that Adam took for his students, I think.
Was it his students? Yeah, I just remember.
I think it was also around that.
Yeah.
But it was a clever idea. Okay, then lastly, to wrap up, and we'll run through this one fairly quickly, but systems of opportunity. So that's the third part of the set. So it was character skills, structures for motivation, and now systems of opportunity. And he gives a reason for the chapter on the intro page. He says, character skills and scaffolding can help us unlock our hidden potential in ourselves, and in those around us. But to give more people a chance to achieve greater things, we need something bigger. Creating opportunities on a larger scale requires us to build better systems in our schools, teams, and organizations. And then we won't touch too much on it, but it goes on to the Finland schooling
system.
Yeah. So just to give a brief overview, so on page 158, they say, based on studying what Finland does differently, I believe much of their success stems from the culture they've created. The culture is rooted in a belief, in the potential of all students. Being disadvantaged was less of a disadvantage in Finland than anywhere else. Along with the highest rate of high performers, they had the lowest rate of low performers. In Finnish schools, a popular mantra is, we can't afford to waste a brain.
Just to add more context, I think they made us at the top after there was a test apparently that was designed for every country to sort of partake in. And I think prior to the results coming, everyone thought either your Asian countries who will score higher, Europe or the US, and out of South Africa even made a feature there in Australia. But surprisingly enough, it was Finland that emerged top. And apparently years ago, I think around the 1980s or before that, the education system was amongst the worst. But they then changed the education approach. And like you're saying, it was more of inclusivity and more of everyone, as you said, their motto was no brain should be wasted. So they had to find ways in which they'd better the education system, and one of which was improving the relationships between students and teachers, And it even says in the chapter, like, surprisingly enough, it wasn't that the teachers had smaller classes. It was actually they had big classes between 20 odd students plus. But I think we did touch on it briefly. One of the things that they ended up doing was looping the coded, which allowed the same teacher to teach the same group for more than a year. In other cases, up to 6 grades.
Yeah, so 2 years. But in some Finnish schools they did it up
to 6. Yeah. And yeah, that just allowed teachers to really get to know their students, you know. And I think further on there was that story of the one refugee that came to a school, and then the principal was like, I want him to stay one grade back, but I'll tutor him.
Yes, yeah.
And like a year afterwards, he had moved to a different school, but by the age of 20, he was running 2 businesses, and you know,
but I'm still in communication with that guy because of the fact that he had been such a help to him. Yeah. But also they did the letting kids play part as well.
Yeah.
So the refrain from one of the Finnish teachers is, the work of a child is to play. So we often want to and they were saying in the US schools and that they like not force, but I think it's also in South Africa to some degree.
Yeah,
it's like education, and it's like drilling in the fact that
numbers reading,
even from the super early ages. Whereas kids it kind of goes back to that social thing, like wanting to love learning and stuff, which is a big thing in Finland as well. Having that culture of loving to learn is the important one. And if you're forcing kids from a young age to do X, Y, Z, then they end up not liking it. But if you encourage them and let them play, and learning through playing, so they use the example of the Finnish kindergarten that one of these people visited. And he says one of the most popular stations was an ice cream shop. Students used a version of Monopoly money to buy and sell imaginary ice cream. As they operated the cash register, took orders, counted out change, they learned to be proactive and pro-social while practicing basic maths and verbal skills.
Yeah, I think that came in when they were trying to motivate the students, because there was a point in which they saw a decline in their marks. They were still top, but there was a huge decline, and they had to find ways in which to motivate their learners, and one of which was incorporating that sort of whole system, like a real life simulation almost.
Yeah.
In kindergarten, yeah.
Yeah, it's just trying to be creative with how
to motivate.
Yeah, how we motivate people. Yeah. Then there's one or two last things. The one was the being better together. So if you're pro-social, and we touched on that kind of stuff as well. But it says on page 181, it turned out that the smartest teams weren't composed of the smartest individuals. In a meta-analysis of 22 studies, Anita and her colleagues discovered that collective intelligence depends less on people's cognitive skills than their pro-social skills.
Yeah.
The best teams have the most team players, people who excel at collaborating with others. And then he wraps it up. It's a well documented that a single bad apple can spoil the barrel. When even one individual fails to act pro-socially, it's enough to make the team, to make a dumb team dumber. So yeah, goes back to that social skills is the more important thing. And that helps you far more than the cognitive skills.
Character skills.
Character skills being pro-social helps you more than the cognitive skills, because then you're able to learn, you like to collaborate with people and bounce ideas to figure out what's the best idea, all of those kind of things. There's one last thing, and then I think we can probably wrap up. So on page 83, it says leaders play an important role in establishing cohesion. When we select leaders, we don't usually pick the person with the strongest leadership skills. We frequently choose the person who talks the most. It's called the Babel effect. Research shows that groups promote the people who command the most airtime, regardless of their aptitude or expertise. And then he wraps that up by saying, the goal isn't to be the smartest person in the room, it's to make the entire room smarter. And I think that can be really difficult at times to even to recognize in ourselves. I think I sometimes don't recognize that in myself, where like I will talk a lot, and then balancing that, and I think to some degree I try, but I can definitely get better at it, is trying to make sure the team does better rather than focusing on yourself. And it's a thing to always keep in mind, because it's quite a funny thing to read, the Babel effect, which is,
I think it's also just that one of those mistaken things where we think people that speak a lot know more, and which may not even. I mean, there's that saying that says empty cans make a lot of noise. Yeah,
that's very true.
Yeah. Cool.
Any final thoughts on the book, Peter?
As always, if you can, grab yourself a copy and read the book. But yeah, no, I mean, just thinking back, there's a lot we didn't touch on. Even like within, like I said, we did the villain one, the whole, there was Steph Curry story as well. There were many interesting stories in the book. But yeah, all in all, I mean, I think we, as people, I think we just need to be aware of, like, or educate ourselves of different words, especially like the learning. Like, I mean, the language one was, I mean, I could relate to that. Like, I mean, I so often don't want to say that, well, they'll laugh at me because I pronounce something wrong and all that. But that's just me robbing myself from actually learning,
Yeah.
But yeah, good book. Read it. Yeah. Anything else you want to add?
No, not too much. Just, I agree. It's a very good book. It's it seems like quite a big book, but it's actually very easy to read. It's not super long. And the illustrations are also really helpful. And I think just trying to develop those character skills and be pro-social is one of the things that really comes out. And then trying to build that scaffolding for ourselves and for others, I think is vitally important. And then he sort of touches on it right at the end, but trying to not just say, okay, I've learned a bunch of stuff and that's where it ends, but to actually try and put that stuff into practice, I think is the part where we really learn. Same idea as the person who taught the quantum mechanics course, and that's how he learned it. In order to really learn these things, we have to put them into practice and try and convey them to others, and get advice on how to tweak different things. So yeah,
cool.
I think that's it.
Cool. Thanks, James.
Thanks, Peter. We'll chat again.
Cool.